we possibly can. I don't think that it's feasible that we can get to budget neutral, but what we're going to be telling anybody that we work with is we want that number to be as close to budget neutral as we possibly can. So the next thing that we did is we started identifying properties across the city that were large enough to build an elementary school on. And we looked for properties that were larger than 10 acres. We selected 13 properties to evaluate. On Saturday, November the 18th, all of our school board members, central office staff, elementary principals, and anybody from the public that wanted to go jumped on a bus, and we drove around and we looked at those 13 sites. Then at our December board meeting, our board narrowed those 13 sites down to the top 5. And so I don't have a clicker, but I'm going to come over behind Mr. White and show you the sites that we looked at. So if you look at these little icons, the yellow, those are students from Stonewall Jackson. And then the red are students from here at Washington Lee. The blue are students from Highland View. And the green icons are students from Van Pelt. These arrows are the properties that we looked at. And this is at exit 1 behind the rest area. Not a very good property. Then we have the Bristol Mall. We've got over here, we've got the property behind Sullins. Up at the top, we have the 2 properties at Long Crescent. We also have Falls Phase 3 at Cabela's, the property beside Walling Distributing, Van Pelt itself. The property there, we have some acreage there. The soccer fields over on Bonham Road. And then down here you see this arrow is the Teneva. There's a property right beside the old Teneva facility. And then there's a couple on King Mill Pike and then one at Lavinia. I think did I get all those sites, Ms. Jones? All right. So what's that?
Long Crescent.
Oh, yeah, at Long Crescent at the top. There's 2 properties at Long Crescent, as you can see up there at the top of our city boundary. And so the final properties that were chosen were a property at Lavinia, which is currently under a contingent contract. After we picked that site, somebody made an offer on it, so that may be off the market. And then Long Crescent 2, if you're going down Interstate 81 between exits 3 and 5, you pass Taylor TV, and then you see the Woodman of the World building. It's that next property over the wooded area that's in the corner as Long Crescent goes up the hill. Then there's a subdivision on King Mill Pike called Witten Hills. There's 33 acres that surrounds it, mostly behind Witten Hills. And then adjoining that is another property that's across from the Dollar General there at the corner of King Mill Pike and Valley Drive and Shakesville. And Shakesville Road. And the city, the front of that is 8 acres that's for sale, and the city owns 6 acres that adjoins that on the backside. And then the final property that was chosen was the acreage at Van Pelt. So we're going to go through each of these properties and tell you a little bit about them. And then we'll be through with this part of the presentation. We'll open it up for questions and comment. So Lavinia is a foreclosed property. It's owned by Capital Bank. It has 18 acres. It's partially flat. It's one of the plats that you can see over here. The estimate on it was about $680,000 to grade it, to get it ready to build on. It is within our students, all of our students live, 88% of them live within a 3-mile radius of that property. It's for sale for $235,000. So that's what that radius looks like. You still see the yellow, blue, red. That middle circle is the 3-mile radius, and it's pretty easy to see that a good portion of our students live within a very short distance of that property. This is the aerial view. As that property is right in the center, you'll see the Y-shaped tree line. That is the Lavinia property. Yeah, let me show you. King Mill Pike is right here. So you turn off of King Mill Pike to get onto Lavinia. And so there's the topo map for that property. As you can see, those are 10-foot lines, and so the topography is not bad there. Moving on to Long Crescent, it's also a foreclosed property. It's owned by Highlands Union Bank, 17 acres, pretty steep. It's for sale for $170,000. One problem with it, it does not have sewer. It's about 2,000 feet from the closest sewer line. From a central standpoint, 94% of our students live within a 3-mile radius, so that's good. However, we had a civil engineer to look at that property as well, and they believe the grading cost there would be exponential, $5 million or more. As you can see, it's the most central of any of the properties that we looked at when you look at it from where our students live. And there's the aerial view. You see 81 there, and you can see Long Crescent kind of winding around the corner of that property. It's mostly wooded. But then when you look at the topo, you can see the front side of it's not that bad, but the top of it, those 10-foot lines are much closer than what we saw at Lavinia. Moving on to Whitten Hills, it's also a foreclosed property, 33 acres, also steep in places. It's for sale for $275,000. It does have utilities, and 89% of our students live within a 3-mile radius there. That's also one of the plans that you can see over here, and they estimate over $1.6 million grading costs to get that ready to build on. Again, it's fairly central. There's the aerial view. Again, it's also another very wooded area. King Mill, you'll see the houses there at the front of that. That's the Whitten Hills subdivision, and then in front of that's King Mill Pike. The topo map, you can see that there are some steep areas and flat areas there. It was not quite $5 million to do the grading here. However, it was approaching $2 million to do the grading, the estimate. And then the next property over from that property is on the corner of Shakesville and King Mill Pike, with the city owning 6 acres behind it, 14 acres total. It's also a little steep in places. It's for sale for $169,000, has utilities, again, very central, and the grading cost would be just a little more there at $1.72. As you can see, just like the others, it's, Bristol's not a very large city, 13 square miles. And so, there's very few places that you can pick in the city where you're not centrally located. And there's the topo. You can see Shakesville coming up the side and Kings Mill Pike running up the front of it. Again, a lot of wooded area there as well. The front part, the topo is not as bad as the top part of it. And then finally, the last property is Van Pelt, and of course the city owns that. There are 32 acres. The school itself sits on 13 acres, and there's 19 acres that surround it. Part of that would be Suncrest Park. Most of it is flat on the top side. Of course, we own it, so it's free, and the utilities are on site. And you may be surprised to find out that 75% of our students live within a 3-mile radius. As you can see, you get outside that circle, some of the students that live in the Stonewall Jackson area are a little further than 3, but they're within a 5-mile radius. One of the questions that has come up is how are bus routes going to be affected if Van Pelt was the site that was chosen. And so we had our bus drivers who drive the routes in this area and the routes in Stonewall to do a run. After you get your last pickup, now drive to Van Pelt. And I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to ask Dan, who's one of those drivers. It was an additional 11 minutes.
Thereabouts, Stonewall Jackson area, we timed it. My last pickup in the morning from Stonewall, 7 or 8 minutes. Where from there to Van Pelt area, probably between 10 and 15.
Yeah. And there's 7 minutes additional time that would be added on to the end of the routes here in the Washington Lee area. So, of course, if we do wherever we build a new school, we'll have to adjust bus routes. But, worst case scenario, those are the additional links that we could potentially see on those routes. And there's the aerial view. Of course, you're probably familiar with the school and the tennis courts and the driving range there. And in the wooded area, that is the park. And as you can see, this is the best topo map that we've looked at in all of the 5 properties. Again, that's on 10-foot 10-foot lines. If you'll see that Van Pelt, the front yard of Van Pelt, really isn't Van Pelt's property. That's Suncrest Park as well. You can see the straight line, the straight black line, that's the boundary. And so there's an L around the school that makes up Suncrest Park. I mean, we take care of that front yard. We mow it, but, if you look at the actual tax map for it in the city, that is actually Suncrest Park in the front. So, I guess my job is to talk everybody into the fact that we need a new school for our students. And I hope that we've provided a good argument. And at this point, I will turn the mic over to Mr. Alvis and let him take it from there.
Thank you, Dr. Perigin. As you can see from the presentation, this isn't something that we've just rushed into. It's something four of us on this board have been together since 2010, and it's something that we've discussed in great detail. From the presentation, looking at our school buildings and the obstacles they face, I mean, we definitely need new facilities for our students. Our students deserve the best that they can get. So with that being said, the 10 plus acres, the sites that we looked at, the best way to narrow it down was money. We don't have the empty pockets. Everyone in this room knows the financial state of our city. The financing plan we have. We know about where we need to keep it as much budget neutral as we can, and that's the only way that we're going to be able to afford a school is to keep it budget neutral. So when you start looking at properties and you start looking at sites, every dollar we have to spend on purchasing the site, or every dollar we have to spend on getting the site ready for grading, then that's less facility we're going to have for our students. So that's how we've narrowed our process down to the sites that we're looking at. So, Dr. Perry.
Let me just add one last thing for those folks who are listening on the radio. If you would like to ask a question via Twitter, even though you can't be here, you can use hashtag #AskASuperQuestion. And we will be monitoring that as we go through tonight. And if we get any questions via Twitter, we'll read those out loud as long as they're appropriate. We know how social media can be sometimes, but we will answer those questions or hear those comments or share those comments as well. And I will say again that all but the school on the bottom left are all schools in Virginia. So again, I would say that our students deserve a 21st century school as well.
So with no further ado, we're here to hear your all's concerns and answer any questions you might have, so we'll open it up to you guys.
We're going to bring the mic to you so that you'll be on the radio too, so you'll get your 15 minutes of fame as well.
So if Van Pelt is chosen, you use the primary intermediate model?
That model, we have not... that would be the most logical model to go with, but as a board, we've not voted on which model we would use at this time. But, when you're looking at savings, that's how we save the most money. When you go to those the primary intermediate model, our saving is going to come through teacher attrition. We're hoping. I think in the last several years we've had 20 teachers a year at least, average about that, either retire or move to a different system. So we think we can absorb that the loss of those positions through retirement and through folks leaving our system.
Just a couple of questions. One, how many students in the new school, and what do you project the cost of the new school?
So we currently, the three schools that we have about a little under 200 here and a little under 200 at Highland View, a little over 200 at Stonewall. So we've got about 600 students. Now, depending on the configure, so that's, if we build just a new elementary school, it'd have to be big enough for 600 students. If we change the grade configurations around, that may make the size a little different. But we're looking at 600 students. Total cost, we don't know, but